morning. My mind is kind of all over the place this morning, so this is going to be a roller coaster ride of a podcast. I have some new damage to the house that I'm going to have to deal with, and just have to deal with it. That's just how life treats you sometimes, so that's what I'm going to do. However, the topic for today's podcast is the tariffs and the Chinese reaction to tariffs. Pretty sure that everybody knows my opinion on this by this point. I don't like tariffs. I don't think that tariffs do a lot of good. On the other hand, I don't like slave labor. I know for a fact that doesn't do the slaves any good. I was reading an article this morning out of the Wall Street Journal that was talking about a couple factories in China that are threatening to, what was the words they used? Put their employees on leave because they're not getting the orders that they used to get from America, customers here in America. And my first thought was, did the journalist who put this article out ask what the people of that factory were being paid? It's a communist country. It's not, the factories are not controlled by the actual factory managers. They're not owned by the factory managers. They're not responsible to anybody really but the state. So everything they say, everything that the factory managers say to the journalist has to be taken with a grain of salt, because they're not going to make their superiors mad, the superior being the state with a capital S. So today's co-host is Raja, but she's done. So the real question I'm asking is, this fluff piece that I read that presented itself as a hard-hitting Chinese perspective didn't take into account that this was a communist country with forced labor. And they treated it like it was a free capitalist country, and that the people in these factories had a choice. They don't have a choice. They're not making a good living, I promise you that. At one point, the article talked about how the managers had already cut them a deal and dropped it 10%, their prices, and they couldn't drop the prices anymore. This is a trade war. This is out and out a communist country fighting Trump's tariffs. The companies aren't going to say anything that they don't have authorization from the government to say. They're not going to drop any prices that the government says they can't drop. The idea that they are dealing with an equivalent society is ridiculous. Yep, the tariffs are going to hurt Americans. The tariffs are going to hurt Chinese. When Trump was elected, he was elected to bring manufacturing back to America. It's not going to be painless. If he's successful, and I don't see how he can be in 4 years, it's not going to be painless. You want manufacturing jobs back in America? There's going to be a transition period. They can't just, wave a magic wand and have a factory pop up down the road from you. Hello, Baggy. Oh, stop tearing up my shirts. So that's one article I read this morning that it's really disturbing to me that the journalists, they just take whatever a communist country, a factory manager in a communist country, and all that entails, they just take that at face value and publish it. I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not a fan of tariffs. I'm not a fan of the communist countries. I'm a fan of freedom. And that's not available to the people in the communist country. So the idea that we're dealing with a equal society is ridiculous. I get it. The chairman of the communist country has to be able to save face. And that's not possible right now. Hey guys, my lap is only so big over here, okay? I helped a friend yesterday install some lights on his fence, and the cats are smelling his dog on me. I'm not sure what the answer is going to be here. In the short term, it's going to be a lot of pain. There's no doubt about that. The markets will continue to fall, I do believe. And I'm okay with that. I mean, probably no retirement for me because the markets are going to fall. However, this isn't really for my future. This is for the future of our children and the nation. I know. The old trope, it's for the kids. Well, literally in this case, if our kids don't have a job to go to, if they don't have a career, what's the point of any of this? So, Sumatra. It is very good coffee from Ubora. It is not as good as Rwanda, but it is very good coffee. I am enjoying it very much. So, just to kind of close the topic of the Chinese trade war that's going on, yeah, there's a price to be paid. It's time to pay the piper. It's my personal opinion that when Nixon opened up the markets into China, although he may have had, I'm not saying he did, I don't know the man's mind, and I don't know what was going on at that time. I was awful young. But when he opened up the trade lanes to Chinese manufacturing, the narrative that was put forth was that the Chinese markets would lean toward capitalism. And instead, the Chinese government was allowed to use this movement to push their form of government further out into the world and have more influence on other countries in the world. So when you're dealing with a communist regime, there has to be limitations. This is something that we should be very aware of. And as we backpedal, which is what this is, back to a more capitalist society, a more, what is the word? A more society based on merit instead of unfettered greed, which is what these companies had, and which is also why the stock market is falling, because those companies have invested so much in that cheap labor in China that they're going to take a hit, because they're going to have to hire not cheap labor, not slave labor. That's my thoughts on that. From the ground up, I am probably on the lowest rung of the economic scale and of the knowledge scale, but that's my opinion. The second article I read today was on COVID and how it's time for those people to pay the piper. Whether you believe whether the actions of the government were justified or not, there were huge cover-ups. And although the past administration, I'm not going to say Biden because I don't think he had the faculties to do this, but I think his cabinet did. They handed out pardons like parents on the front porch on Halloween hand out candy. And, oh, you can't have that stuff. And that was a huge, huge travesty of justice, in my opinion. Hell, they gave Fauci a pardon for a crime he wasn't charged for. Kind of sounds like maybe they're protecting him from a crime he did. The people that did the cover-ups, that tried to bend the narrative away from a lab, from COVID coming from a lab, they should be held accountable. One of the things that I read was that these people they can no longer take the Fifth Amendment and not testify because they don't have to worry about the guiltiness of what they did because they've been given a pardon. So if they called Dr. Fauci and he was in front of Congress and refused to testify, at that point he's committing a crime and he can be arrested for that. So I would like, as an American, to be able to put this behind us. But I don't think we're going to put this behind us. This is a test of America's... Hey, leave that alone, buddy. This is a test of Americans' ability to have the, what is the word? Attention span to maintain the attention span to maintain their desire to have justice brought to these individuals. So until there's justice, there's not going to be any closure, and it's going to keep popping up. So let's get on with it. Let's have the hearings public. Let's have the people who are responsible for funding these labs brought up to Congress and testify. This is not a hard thing to do. Demand that they tell the truth. Let's find out. Let's get this behind us. I want. Look, this is the whole boy who cried wolf scenario. What happens now when we get a true pandemic? I mean, half the country thinks this was a plandemic. You know, I'm sure you've heard this word. But what's next? If we run into an actual pandemic that's going to wipe out the human race, you facilitated that by not being honest with the people of the world, much less America. So we want the truth. The citizenry of America want the truth. We want openness. We want to see how the sausage is and was made. It's frustrating. I'm not an educated man, but I know there was some covering up going on. Whether COVID came from a lab or whether, we had some military men catch COVID in 2019 that was covered up. That was in the article I read, by the way. This is ridiculous. We're in 2025. COVID-19 is 5 years behind us, and we don't have closure on that. Let's get some closure. Let's figure this out. So here's the truth of the matter for this morning. I really didn't feel like doing a video. I'm here doing a video, drinking my coffee, getting dirty looks from the cat because he didn't get enough to eat, evidently. It's not my fault. We can't feed them a lot. They puke if they get too much kibble. There's an early morning subject for you. Cat hairballs and puke from cats. Here I am doing this video with a full plate and poor lighting. That's all I got this morning. I hope you all find peace, love, and dream. Until next time.